Hey guys, it's Jack. I just wanted to talk to you today about a way that you can help support the podcast if you're not already. We would really appreciate it if you guys went and reviewed us on Apple or Spotify. Those reviews really help people find the podcast and help it get recognized. And, if you've been enjoying the show, we really appreciate your support. Another thing that you can do to support the channel is to become a Patreon member. So we have Patreon memberships that start at just $5 a month. And when you sign up, you get access to all of our episodes ad free. That's the big bonus for that. I mean, we also do some Patreon bonus episodes for our subscribers. But this is the biggest and best way that you can support the Team House channel and podcast if you'd like to. And we really appreciate that. So go and check us out at patreon.com/the Team House.
Hello. Welcome to another episode of Eyes On. I'm Andy Milburn.
Jason Lyons.
Hey guys, I'm D. I'm the producer of the Team House and Izon. Very excited today. We have what I wanted to talk about today was what's going on in with France and Macron and Putin. So we were talking before we started recording, and I think the main thing was last week Macron had his State of the Union or whatever that equivalent is in France, and he mentioned like it's not out of the realm of possibility of sending troops to Ukraine. And since then, the Russians came out and said that they are preparing to send about 2,000 troops into Ukraine.
The
France,
French are.
the French are correct,
Yeah.
and France came out and said no, that's disinformation. But then, Chief of Staff of the Army in France said that no, we're preparing for all eventualities, and I kind of want to get a sense of what you guys think, like what happens next. Like, obviously, 2,000 troops, even if they're perfect, won't, like, well trained and amazing, won't really move the needle, I
Perfect.
think.
They're French.
Yeah, but
They will at
they
least
got some
be
game.
they will at least be perfectly dressed.
Do they have the
They
style? They got style.
they will die handsome. Um yeah, here's a couple of thoughts on this. The 2000 troops piece is frankly a mystery because the French are too much of an adult nation. You mean as opposed to Russia to deny something that is being planned. If they're planning to move 2,000 troops anywhere, then they would at least qualify their statement saying no, these guys are not going to Russia. But they've simply they've denied it. I doubt very much there is something in that. I think what we're seeing at play here is, first of all, the Russians, Putin's playing to geopolitics because he knows that Macron's counterparts, whether they personally like him or dislike him, know that he can be a little bit fickle and he is playing to a domestic audience, and they want to sow some doubt among other NATO members. And I think you have to understand the relationship between France and the rest of NATO, some of the background here. Remember, France for the longest time was not part of the military alliance and has always kind of played its own game, to include in the nuclear side. No one knows what the French nuclear plans are.
Yeah.
But they retain strict control without any collaboration with others. So I would say this: you've got two leaders playing two politics. One is Putin's case, international politics, and Macron very much domestic politics. Remember what's happening at home in the upcoming elections. Who's opposing him? Who has the largest number of votes? Either of you guys know right now in France?
I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's the National Front, Marie Le Pen, all right, who's about as right wing as they come. In fact, her father was avowedly anti-Semitic and an apologist at times. No, or at all times for the Vichy administration, which was the collaboration, the French administration who collaborated with the Germans during the Second World War. So you've got him opposing this person with this legacy of anti-immigration and who is behind the scenes, I mean, there has been some collaboration between the Russians and the the French National Front, or at least accusations thereof. I say desperately trying to shield us from a lawsuit here. So Macron is, and the National Front in France is gaining momentum in the face of a lot of the rioting and violence there. I believe they've got, looking at 20 to 30% of votes in the it's not the French Parliament, Senate. Someone's going to butcher me for this, but anyway, the number of seats they've had. So Macron is worried about this, and he wants to put a fault line between himself and Le Pen at home, and that fault line is where the French domestic population stands on Russia, right? And most part of the population is anti-Russia, of course, and Macron is playing to that. Now, that's a cynical view. To explain why Macron,
which is probably the right view. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, geopolitics, France. Perhaps he has had a Damascusian revelation here that Putin is indeed a threat to regional security, a severe threat to regional security, and that France will join ranks with Poland and the Baltic states, who are kind of in and the UK. I mean, let's just say that again. France join hands with blah, blah, and the UK. This is a very unusual movement in both countries' histories, but behind Ukraine, because you're seeing, I mean, you have done from the start, but I think 2024 is going to be the year where you see this wider divergence within NATO between the kind of, the peaceniks, or those who want to, can't we all be friends, and, hey, let's have a frozen conflict. I mean, you name it, most of the Southern European countries, Germany on the fence, France, who knows? Macron wants to take France now firmly into the Ukrainian camp, which is more and more important now as US support for Ukraine falters. That's just, so I think he's playing to domestic politics.
And I think some of the less vocal nations like Finland are using this opportunity to step up and throw their hat in the ring. Along with this story, the foreign minister of Finland, Elina Valtonen, she stated that Western nations should be prepared to deploy troops into Ukraine if the situation worsens. And along with that, as a gesture, along with that statement, it was reported that Finland is donating warships to the Ukraine. How many and what type is not known, unless you guys know that. And it'll include training Ukrainian personnel on the use of them. So, I mean, I think while this may be a rumor as far as France is concerned with the 2,000 troops, I think it's on one side, on Western side, giving smaller nations or those less vocal a chance to step up and say, well, yeah, maybe it's a rumor, but we need to be ready, right, guys? And also on the Russian side, it's a chance for them to use France as that springboard, that warning to other nations. If it is true, just know that we're going to target you. The Russian foreign minister said they will be French troops will become a target for the Russian military. And it's kind of like, duh, yeah, but I think that's a way of them to throw that message out there. Tell the rest of your people that if you step foot in here, that it's on.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. Yeah, using France as kind of an example, a tripwire.
Yeah.
And that's also a great point about the smaller countries within NATO banding together. It's kind of a sub-regional pact in the face of Russian aggression. And those are the countries with most skin in the game. Yeah. Finland and Sweden, both with borders with Russia. Yep. Now NATO's newest most member, and Sweden making a firm jump from being a neutral country now to being, if not one of the most bellicose, but certainly one of the most concerned within NATO. So that's all good news, that Finland and Sweden coming on board.
Yeah. And I think, though, it's worrisome for them, too, because they're jumping in at a time when, like you said, the U.S. is faltering. So it's kind of like, well, wait a minute, we got into NATO so that we're, we can protect each other. I'm sure that in the back of their minds, it's like, well, if the U.S. is faltering on Ukraine, what are they going to do if Russia makes a move on us?
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be very interesting. I think 2024 is going to be everyone says this about every year, I suppose, a decisive year, but it's certainly going to be a decisive year as far as US leadership in Europe. As far as, the direction of our own elections, where that takes us vis-a-vis support for NATO. One side, very continued staunch traditional support for a European alliance that's actually paid huge dividends for us in our past, and those who think it hasn't really just haven't paid attention to history. And shows kind of where I lie. Or on the other side, just an isolationist policy of hey, any alliance is a waste of money. And by the way, that NATO countries are stepping up to the plate. I believe only 11 right now pay the 2% requirement. But you know what? 3 years ago, it was 3 countries.
Yeah.
So you can see this increase. And speaking of deterrence, I got to go and shoot Richie. I hear him turning over my trash. So talk about it right back.
So expanding a little bit more on what Andy was saying, we are seeing that uptick in NATO members paying their fair share. So it kind of skews the argument on the other side about pulling out and remaining isolationist, which I can understand that. I can understand that argument, because prior to Ukraine, we're not really seeing the bang for the buck. There hasn't been this before, a Ukraine situation where NATO has really had to step up and really put their money where their mouth is. But now more and more, it's becoming more of a reality where we're going to have to. We haven't actually had to all in, NATO hasn't had to all in, but we're right at that precipice where we may need to. So as Andy was saying, this year and this election in particular in the United States is going to be key. So Russia is they have their own issues going on. They just replaced the commander in chief of their navy. I cannot remember the outgoing one's name, but he was replaced by an admiral named Alexander Moiseev. He was a former submariner, staunch Russian loyalist, and he was bought in because reports are saying that Russia's lost a third of their fleet. And that's big numbers. So
a third of your fleet, and and Ukraine doesn't even have a navy.
Doesn't even have a navy. Yeah.
Black Sea Fleet.
Yeah. Black Sea Fleet. Yep. And so they've got their own issues going on. And then I was reading in my studies that their oil and natural gas fields are insanely vulnerable. And so they're trying to bolster their air defense around those things, because I read a statistic that said up to 6,000 barrels a day are lost in attacks from Ukrainian forces. So that's a huge, huge hit they're taking. So while we're working to shore up NATO, Russia's got its own issues going on. So yeah, it's been crazy.
Yeah, there's some as Dee would say, some gnarly video out there on what's it called? Warthog Defense. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
But Warthog. Warthog.
Yeah, it's pretty good. But anyway, it's of Avdiivka after the fall, taken from perspective of Russian looters. But more importantly, it just shows it's been a year since I was there, and the place was flattened. And so you can imagine now, after a year, that same area, just incredible devastation there. Yeah. It's absolutely extraordinary.
And as like a layman, I would say, like, one of Putin's big reasons as to why he went into Ukraine was to stop the expansion of NATO, right? Like that's like my friends, who are anti this or whatever, anti, the war in Ukraine, always tell me about like, oh yeah, he went in to like stop
Yeah.
Ukraine going into NATO. I'm like, you
And he
dummies.
strengthened NATO beyond its
Yeah,
wildest
that's what I would
ambitions.
say. Like we
Yeah.
added more
And
countries to NATO that
Yeah.
border Russia.
forced, I mean, drove Finland and Sweden as, who jumped in to embrace NATO, drove every member's capacity or appetite for defense spending
Yeah.
up. The Czech Republic just announced that the Czech Republic has never been bellicose, and they've just announced that they're going to be spending above 2% GDP coming up. So that's 11th or 12th. So yeah, Putin has done great things for NATO. And by the way, too, and this is lost, I think, in some of the static about people's concern about money, taxpayers' money. I'm laughing because these voices out there who just go on and on about how we're getting ripped off financially by the rest of the world don't look at the alternative, which is US lives on the line instead of money. I mean, we don't get to avoid both of those, right? If we want regional stability, and we don't
Also,
achieve regional stability by hiding within the shores. I mean, that's such an antiquated approach. I mean, that was an antiquated approach in 1941, and yet we still have people thinking that we can just sit here at home and the world won't trouble us, But anyway, I mean, that's my point, that this has been a crown jewel for NATO. I'm talking about the war in Ukraine. I'm not, no, obviously, obviously, I'm not back in the invasion, but I'm saying he has played right into NATO's hands.
Yeah.
And by the way, attrited the Russian military in a way that we just couldn't imagine in a conventional conflict over the period of over 2 years now. The Russian military, yes, it's become stronger and adapted in some ways, but it has been attrited beyond imagination.
Absolutely.
It's been
well, I mean,
the most conservative estimates, have it around 45, 50,000 dead Russians, and you multiply 10 times that for most conservative estimates. Some people think it's twice that.
I was gonna say something. God damn it. No, so going back to the what if France landed 2,000 troops in Ukraine, which is probably not going to happen. Highly unlikely anyway. I mean,
well, it depends how it's done, right? This is all about presentation and posturing and attribution. It's all about play. In the same way, remember we talked about the Shahed drone that hit Tower 22 and the US not wanting to say, yes, it was made in Iran. If that was the case, it's, this is kind of the same thing. The United Kingdom has had soldiers in Ukraine now for coming on, a year and a half. Yeah, 18 months. The special operations guys doing certain things. It's kind of a open secret, but it's below the radar. The UK doesn't announce it. The Russians undoubtedly know that they are there, but it's not out in the public forum, so no one's threatening war against the UK. You see what I'm saying? It would put both Russia and the UK. So here, because Russia's now, Putin's saying, no, I'll do this and that. It's because, if you're stupid enough to say, hey, I'm going to send 2,000 guys, of course, Putin's going to say that. All right. But everyone knows the way that this game is played. You can do other stuff under the radar and it's not going to get attributed because your adversary doesn't want to be put in that position with his domestic public where now he has to escalate to war.
I'd love to know how it all gets coordinated because like you said, there's UK special forces in there, and I'm sure there are French special forces in there, or even French intelligence. There's got to be a smorgasbord of intelligence and military advisors, whatever, in there. Who coordinates it? What goes down?
Yeah, I mean, that's great. That's great. The bottom line is, I'm sure, well, you know this based on some of Jack's writings, there's coordination within NATO countries, and then there's a subgroup who may be doing really ultra secret stuff, maybe,
Right.
and they coordinate just directly with them, and then there may be unilateral stuff going on. And on that note, I would be surprised if France is doing anything in Ukraine. Because it's got a very capable intelligence service, and Jason knows more about this. And the Duxian, what's it called, Duxian Bureau, very capable. But Eastern Europe just isn't their bag, baby. They are very focused on the Middle East and Africa. Africa really is their thing, and keeping threats at an arm's length from the homeland. And so from their perspective, there are far larger, far more capable intelligence agencies focused on Ukraine and the Russian threat. So they don't need, and they will share openly with the French. So there's no need to. The French, it's interesting. I mean, in Iraq, when I was out there with the siege of Sodif, the French had something going on, which was kind of an open secret among the SOF, but they didn't openly share, which was they were going there to whack French citizens. That was the mission of their tier 1 unit in northern Iraq. It wasn't, train, advise, and assist and help, support. It was go after and kill French citizens who had joined ISIS. And in a way that brought it home, that not a drone strike, but being shot between the eyes. And getting that message out, so that French citizens on the other side of the Flot knew that there was a French team on our side who didn't give a shit about anything else except going after them. It was a very interesting psychological, it made me realize, it scared the enemy in a way that drone strikes did not. Human beings every night hunting for them. Clever. Yeah.
What was that like to manage, Andy?
They were nothing.
Really?
They were they were nothing to do with me. It was a fucking nightmare, because they would come back. They claimed they had coordinated forward passage lines, rear passage lines, but they would come back through the Kurdish lines, and there was a blue on blue. Fortunately, no one hurt one night. And that's how we started to unpack all this shit by saying, hey, if you fuckers are doing things out there, it would be nice to know, because, we're bringing fires in here, and you might mistake you for the enemy. Is it the law? Yeah.
So, Andy, do you know
how many, I wonder how many complaints we're going to get for that? But
why? You spoke about this on a previous Team House episode. I remember.
It was just we très désolé.
So I'm was reading a little bit about these Russian volunteer forces in Ukraine, and Andy, I wanted to see if you could speak to that a little bit. I honestly didn't know anything about them or much about them until the last couple of weeks with these videos that are being shown, and allegedly they made an incursion into Russia to attack targets. Russia's refuting those claims, but do you know anything about them?
So beginning with the latest alleged ground attack, Wall Street Journal's released a pretty convincing, I think it was a Wall Street Journal's pretty convincing video of it. And the key part about this, it wasn't drone strikes and everything. It was a ground launched attack, apparently from Ukrainian territory into Russian territory, to Belgrade. And there's footage of this armed group moving into the town, being greeted, taking down Russian flags, putting up their own, and making announcements. And it looks like, probably a small force. It was kind of almost a token gesture, but at the same time, it's significant in the same way that when the Wagner group was stirring up trouble, it was significant. But no, so here's all I know. Maybe what I'm saying I know is not true. I'm happy to say that. But what I do know is that there's 3 groups for sure that are working for the GUR or fall under the auspices of the GUR. So taking direction from the Ukrainians. The GUR is their military intelligence directorate. You've heard me mention Budanov, who's their whiz kid head. He's 39 years old. He's been directing a lot of the behind the scenes operations behind the lines operations against the Russians. And this is one of his lines of effort. Are Russian volunteers and the Ukrainians. And the reason why they hold them under intelligence and they haven't just pulled them under the C2 of the armed forces is that they're very wary about being seen to support the wrong type of people. And there are groups out there that look something like neo-Nazis. And the last thing that the Ukrainians want, with the Russian narrative of them being Nazis, is to side with Russian groups that are far right wing. This is all kind of strange because most people would think you cannot get further right wing of Putin, right? But it's a topsy-turvy world. Anyway, that's as far as real damage, token. But it is the sight of the Russian flag being hauled down on Russian territory and Russian civilians cheering that is likely to really concern Putin.
Gotcha.
Because he's paranoid anyway.
Yeah.
They've also derailed a couple of trains, blown up fuel trucks. So they are getting direction, certainly to hit Russian logistics support. It isn't all token. And in that sense, their efforts have been integrated with Ukrainian special operations to some extent.
Gotcha. Yeah, the stories that I've been reading, I just watched a video before we started shooting, said that Russian intelligence has been, especially military intelligence, has been tasked with finding these folks and first naming them so they can publicly shame them and then eliminating them. So I guess it's kind of like you said with France and Russia, it's more of a warning to others. This is what you get, kind of thing. So it's pretty.
Collaborators on your own side, especially in this war, where they're both speaking the same language, is a particularly emotive issue, and it has been from the beginning of the war. When I was in Kiev, and we were having to change ranges every day or so because we were getting targeted by artillery, and that artillery was being brought down on us the only way it could have been spotted, because there weren't Russian drones overhead at that point in Kiev, was by collaborators, locals calling in artillery fire. So, it's a real issue on both sides. Ukrainians have gone after, a la Mossad, they've gone after collaborators within the occupied territories, some pretty inventive methods of knocking them off. And by the way, some of you tracked to the Russian submarine commander who was shot while jogging in his his base hometown deep within Russia, and he was responsible. His submarine was among the ones that launched the cruise missiles at Kiev, and so they tracked him down that far. So there it is. It's a contrast to the attritional slogfest on the front. Is some very innovative and effective resistance being organized by Budanov. The last thing I'll say on this is the one thing about resistance, okay, and it may be because unconventional warfare. It may be because it is sexy. It may be because, or it sounds sexy. It may be because Army Green Berets tie their whole legacy, their ethos to it, that we collectively exaggerate its effectiveness. Everyone exaggerates its effectiveness when it's working for you.
Isn't that part of it?
You look back at look back at the Second World War. Exactly. Yeah. To some extent, the strategic messaging to your adversary that he is not safe in his rear areas. No need for some crass jokes there, D. But that feeling is a lot of it is psychological, and it causes him to involve a significant number of resources, a disproportionate number of his combat power, not on the front, but to handle this type of thing in his rear. Plus the psychological effect of civilians with et cetera, et cetera. It has exponential effects if done correctly. However, in the Second World War, you're going to hate me for saying this, but they've done studies of resistance in the Second World War, and for the most part, it was counterproductive and ineffective. Yes, I know I've seen all the movies, but my point is, take case in point, the biggest success boasted by one of the biggest successes, the biggest was the destruction of the heavy water plant, German heavy water plant at Telemark in Norway. But one of the others was the assassination of Major General Heydrich, Lieutenant General Heydrich, who is regional commander of the SS. He was killed actually in Czechoslovakia by local resistance. Tremendous blow against the Germans. But what did they do? They wiped out thousands of people in that area. The Czech population still remembers that, right? Long after the effects of Heydrich's death have affected the Wehrmacht. There's a downside to resistance, and that is your adversary controls everything. And that makes it very difficult to be effective. And often you have to wait for one of two tipping points. One is when, the adversary tips a point as far as just pissing off the local population. But the other, all important, is where the fear-hatred fulcrum, right? It goes from they stop fearing their hatred of the enemy outbalances, their fear. So to my point, that point is probably being hit with some Russians. They figure, hey, this country is on such a downhill slide. I'm, out of the job. I'm facing prospect of being conscripted anyway to fight for Putin. So I may as well pick up a rifle and do this now. And if worse comes to worse, I can defect to Ukraine and have a pretty decent life. So there's pragmatic reasons for these guys doing this. I'm sure it's not all ideological. No one acts purely out of ideological means unless they have seriously ill.
One last thing for me before I got to bounce. I saw, speaking of conscription, that Russian contract servicemen are now being exempted from criminal liability. Go figure. So if they commit,
just a blanket exemption.
Yeah, it's a temporary contract for those who are already in prison for crimes. If they agree to sign this service contract, it will be temporarily on hold until, depending on how things go. And for new conscripts, they're being told you're not criminally liable for whatever you do. So
that's really interesting. It sounds, again, it's a reminder of kind of seventh group recruiting methods. If you speak Spanish, we'll overlook whatever else comes up. All right. On that note. D, any closing comments?
No, that was great. I enjoyed it. I want everyone who listens to this or watches this to like and subscribe. If you're listening to us on the audio platforms, rate and review us 5 stars. That's big for us. Check out Andy's Substack. Check out Andy's Twitter. All the links will be in the description. And of course, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/theteamhouse.
Please buy my book.
And Andy's book will be in the description as well. It's great.
When the tempest gathers, it just won the Eugene Percy Sledge Award, Marine Corps Heritage Foundation. Yeah, awesome. Sorry, I was stumbling a little bit there. I was just amazed that the Marine Corps had accepted the book into the fold.
Congratulations.
Yeah, that's great. The link will be in the description.
I didn't plan to plug that, but
no, it's fine. Your book is actually one of the 3 books I've read in my life. So
That's awesome.
Or had read to you. Let's be specific.
It's Andy's book, When the Tempest Gathers, and it's Jack's book because Jack made me do it. Like when I started working there.
Yeah, so I have a horrible feeling that you're not joking. So let's wrap up at this point. All right, everyone. Thanks very much. Yeah, absolutely. Please like, subscribe, tell your friends, forward this freely.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.